It started as a quiet afternoon like any other birds chirping, kids riding bikes down the sidewalk, and neighbors mowing their lawns. But everything changed when the HOA president stormed onto my front porch, red-faced and raging. She wasn't there to talk or ask questions. No, she was there to kick my teenage daughter out of our own home. Her reason? A noise complaint from a gathering my daughter had the night before. Just a few friends from school. Nothing wild, no loud music. But the HOA president acted like it was a crime scene. She shouted, demanded we leave, and threatened fines. My daughter, only 16, stood frozen behind me, confused and scared. I tried to reason with her, but the woman wouldn't hear a word. She said my daughter was disturbing the community and didn't belong here. She even tried to push past me into the house. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a noise complaint. It felt personal, like she had been waiting for a reason to cause trouble for us, and it wasn't the first time either. There had been subtle comments, strange notes left on our door, and too many coincidences to ignore. But I never expected what came next. Later that week, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, there was a loud knock at her door, not ours. A black SUV was parked outside, and a man in a dark suit stood on her porch with a badge. A U.S. Marshal. From behind the blinds, I watched her expression change from smug confidence to sheer panic. I didn't know what he was there for. I knew right then, whatever power she thought she had, it was crumbling. And that's when the real story began, because what the Marshal told her next flipped everything upside down. The Marshal stood there, calm and collected, while the HOA president's call her Carol froze in the doorway. She tried to keep her usual controlling tone, asking what this was about, but her voice shook just enough to give her away. The Marshal didn't say much. He flashed his badge, handed her a sealed envelope, and told her she needed to read it carefully. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough to know it wasn't something small. Carol kept glancing around, like she hoped no one was watching. But I was. And I knew whatever was happening, it was bigger than a noise complaint. After the Marshal left, she slammed the door and disappeared inside. But now, I was full of questions. Why would a federal officer be showing up at her house? What could she possibly be involved in? She always acted like she ran the entire neighborhood, barking orders at people, handing out citations for overgrown grass or trash bins left out an hour too long. Everyone walked on eggshells around her, and something had shifted. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about me or my daughter. There was more going on behind her perfect smile and neatly trimmed lawn. That night, I started digging. I went through old emails from the HOA, read minutes from past meetings, and even talked to a few neighbors who'd had their own run-ins with Carol. Turns out, we weren't the only ones she'd gone after. One family said she tried to fine them for having a garden gnome in the front yard. Another neighbor told me she once threatened to have someone evicted over a birthday party that ran 10 minutes past curfew. And all the while, she kept pushing her own rules through, never letting anyone else on the board question her. Still, none of that explained why a U.S. Marshal would be involved. The more I looked, the more I wondered if this whole HOA power trip was just to cover something to distract from what was really going on. And then I found something that changed everything. Not answers, but the start of a much deeper story. The next morning, I noticed Carol's car was still in the driveway, but her porch light was off, something that had never happened before. She was the type who checked everyone's recycling bins, so her sudden silence was loud. I kept thinking about that envelope the Marshal gave her. What was in it? An investigation? A legal notice? And why now? I couldn't shake the feeling that this went way beyond HOA drama. Later that day, I got a call from Mrs. Jensen, a retired school teacher who lived 2 doors down. She whispered like someone might be listening and asked if I'd heard what happened. I played dumb, and she told. She saw Carol shredding papers late into the night stacks of them. "I don't know what she's hiding," she said, "but it's not just about your daughter. Something's not right." That's when I started connecting the dots. A few months ago, our HOA dues went up with no clear reason, Carol claimed. It was for community improvements, but we hadn't seen a single new project. No repairs, no upgrades, just more strict rules and fines. A few neighbors even mentioned they'd been locked out of voting meetings or told their input wasn't needed. At the time, we figured she was just being controlling. But now, it felt like a smokescreen. Meanwhile, my daughter kept asking if she had done something wrong. She didn't understand why someone in power would target her so harshly. And honestly, I didn't either, not until I found an old email chain from a former HOA board member who had mysteriously stepped down. It mentioned financial discrepancies and unauthorized use of community funds. That board member had since moved away, suddenly no goodbye. No forwarding address. I sent the emails to a friend who works in real estate law. She read through them and texted me back one sentence: "Something's off here, don't confront her yet." That warning was enough for me to hold back, but it also made everything feel more dangerous. What if Carol wasn't just abusing her authority for petty power trips? What if she was hiding something that could bring the whole HOA crashing down? And what if we were getting too close? Over the next few days, the neighborhood felt different, quieter, but heavier. People walked their dogs faster, avoided eye contact, and whispers traveled faster than cars on the street. Carol still hadn't shown her face. No HOA emails, no surprise inspections, just silence. The next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. People stood in small groups on their driveways, talking in hushed tones. A few snapped photos of the scene before the officers cleared out. But no one had clear answers, only rumors. One said Carol was arrested. Another said the man who tried to flee was a federal informant. But the truth didn't come until later that afternoon, when the HOA board, what was left of it, called an emergency meeting at the community center. I went, along with almost every homeowner on the block. The mood was tense. The acting board member, Mrs. Jensen, stood at the front with shaking hands and a stack of papers. She looked overwhelmed but determined. "There's no easy way to say this," she began, "but our former HOA president has been arrested on multiple charges, including fraud, identity theft, and misuse of HOA funds." Gasps filled the room. She went on to explain that for nearly 2 years, Carol had been forging resident signatures on checks and redirecting dues into a personal account. The man found in her home was a former financial consultant who had been helping her cook the books. Together, they'd created fake invoices, covered up missing funds, and even threatened homeowners who asked too many questions. That explained the odd fines, the rising fees, the forced removals, including the one she tried to push on my daughter. But just as we thought it was over, just as the weight started to lift, one of the residents raised their hand. It was Mr. Patel, a quiet man who rarely spoke at meetings. "There's something else," he said. "A few months ago, Carol pressured me into signing a document I didn't understand, said it was just a new parking policy. But now, I think it was something else." That one line shifted the air again. Mrs. Jensen asked to see the document. When she unfolded it, her face went pale. It wasn't a parking policy. It was a transfer of partial property rights signed by 3 homeowners, all unknowingly. Carol hadn't just been stealing money, she had started taking legal ownership of people's homes. The room fell silent. Even with her gone, the damage wasn't over. And as we sat there, stunned, one thought crossed my mind. What else had she left behind that we hadn't uncovered yet? In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood slowly began to feel normal again, though. A new kind of normal. The FBI continued their investigation. and homeowners who had unknowingly signed fake documents were given legal help to reverse any damage. Thankfully, with the cooperation of the new acting board and the federal team, all forged transfers were declared invalid. Carol's accounts were frozen, and a full audit of the HOA's finances revealed just how deep the fraud ran. Nearly 6 figures missing. My daughter, the reason this whole mess started, was finally able to breathe easy. No more surprise visits, no threats, no shouting on our doorstep. She even helped organize a small block gathering away for neighbors to reconnect after months of tension and mistrust. For the first time, people were laughing together again instead of whispering behind closed doors. The community, once divided by fear and control, was starting to come back together. As for Carol, she faced multiple charges in court. Her trial is still ongoing, but with the evidence they've collected, signed checks, fake documents, witness testimony, it's only a matter of time before justice catches up to her. The man found with her is cooperating with authorities in exchange for a lighter sentence, and his testimony has filled in many of the missing pieces. Mrs. Jensen and a small group of honest neighbors stepped in to rebuild the HOA from the ground up. New rules were put in place, clear, fair, and transparent. Every decision now requires a vote, and all finances are posted publicly. No more secrets. No more unchecked power. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't just dealing with Carol. It was realizing how easily trust can be used against people. But in the end, what she didn't count on was the strength of a community willing to stand up, speak out, and fight back. What started with a threat against my daughter ended with a neighborhood taking its voice back. And that's something no one can take away again.